Welcome back to Gospel Kanji. I'm your host, Kent Cisco. If you wanted to tell your loved one that you love them in Japanese, you might say, "Omae ga daisuki nanda yo." I love you. Inside that sentence is the word daisuki, meaning love. And inside daisuki is a single kanji. It's a kanji that's simple enough. It's two parts. On the left, woman. On the right, child. A woman and a child. It makes sense, right? A mother loves her child. That's the most natural thing in the world. But what if the meaning of this kanji runs deeper than a mother's affection? What if this is not just any woman and any child, but a particular woman with a particular child? And what if the ones who first shaped this character in Japan saw woman and child not as a simple domestic scene, but as the very moment they first glimpsed the wisdom of God that He wanted them to see? Today on Gospel Kanji, we're going to follow the Magi right up to the doorway of a small home in Bethlehem and watch as they step inside and see what happens when they finally lay eyes on the child they traveled so far to find. What had the Magi imagined they would see? For months, or longer maybe. They traveled after seeing a mysterious light in the heavens. They had crossed oceans and deserts sustained only by their questions. Who is this king? Where will we find him? What will he be like? Naturally, their first stop was Jerusalem. Where else would a new king of the Jews be born if not in the royal palace of the city of David? Surely there, among marble pillars and velvet robes, they would find the child they had traveled so far to meet. But instead of a newborn king, they found Herod, a man wrapped in paranoia, threatened by their very questions. A man who sat on a throne, but inspired no reverence. Nothing about Herod stirred them to bow, not his power, not his palace, not his crown. The Magi had spent their lives around such rulers. They'd studied mysteries, purchased knowledge at a high price, and gained wisdom that made them respected in every place on the planet. They were not easily impressed. They did not bow cheaply. And yet, as they left Herod's palace, bewildered, the star reappeared. It went before them, pulling them south toward Bethlehem. Their anticipation must have built with every step. If not in Jerusalem, then what? If not a palace, then where? What kind of king waits for us at the other end of this road? And then the star stopped over a simple house. They approached, their hearts pounding, and stepped through the doorway. Matthew tells us simply, after coming into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell to the ground and worshiped him. Then, opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Matthew 2:11. No throne, no crown, no guards at the door, just a young mother, perhaps seated on a low stool holding her child, a little boy not yet speaking, not yet ruling, just old enough to toddle across the floor. And yet, the instant their eyes fall on him, they knew something in that image pierced deeper than all their studies, beyond all their calculations of stars and scrolls. The act of God Himself being born of a woman, becoming flesh, spoke louder than any oracle. Without words, He was declaring, "I love you." This was not domestic love alone. This was divine revelation. For the first time, the Magi understood that the God of the universe was not demanding retribution. He wasn't waiting to punish them for arrogance, deceit, or self-righteousness. He wasn't asking for another filthy transaction, the way the false gods always did. Grain for blessing and gold for favor and blood for knowledge. No, this God was different. This God was love. John 3:16-19 put it plainly. For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son. This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light. The whole world was in darkness, and here, in the arms of Mary, the Magi saw the great light, not in the distant stars, not locked away in scrolls, but embodied in a child. And in that moment, every pursuit of wisdom, every philosophy of men paled before the wisdom of God. Their knees buckled, their foreheads touched the ground. They worshiped, not as they might honor a king, not as they might flatter an emperor, but as only God deserves to be worshiped. And in that act, they made a declaration greater than any words. God had come in the flesh. All their lives they had petitioned heaven, show us, tell us, who are you? And now God had answered. He had led them past China's vast learning, past India's philosophies, past Persia's power, past Greece's celebrated wisdom, past Rome's iron rule, all the might and glory of nations. And to this humble house they came in Bethlehem, and there in silence God spoke his first words of wisdom to them. I love you. They may have thought their long journey was over, but it was only the beginning. For what God showed them that day in that simple image of a woman and child, that would go on echoing in their hearts for the rest of their lives. For more than 2,000 years, this wisdom has been hiding in plain sight, waiting. And now together, we get to open it up and uncover the story it's been holding all along. We live in an age where people often repeat the phrase, knowledge is power. And in many ways, it feels true. With a smartphone in our pocket or artificial intelligence at our fingertips, we can summon more information in seconds than entire civilizations once stored in their greatest libraries. AI can analyze, predict, translate, even create amazing things to a degree. It feels almost limitless. But here's the question, does this kind of knowledge alone give us wisdom? That's where the story of the Magi comes in. The Magi were men of immense learning. They studied the stars. They mastered philosophy, history, and mathematics. They understood the sciences and mysteries of their day better than anyone else on the planet. In any sense, they were the artificial intelligence of their age. People turned to them for answers no one else could provide. And yet, with all their accumulated knowledge, they still felt something was missing. They were seekers, unsatisfied with information alone. Their journey to Bethlehem tells us something profound. Knowledge without direction can only take you so far. Information can fill the mind, but it doesn't always fill the heart. What the Magi needed and what they eventually found was the wisdom of God. And that wisdom wasn't hidden in another chart of the stars or another calculation. It was in seeing a child and his mother, the image of God's love. Think about that. All their learning, all their pursuit of knowledge led them not to more data, but to a person, to Jesus, the one the scriptures calls the wisdom of God. In that moment, the Magi discover what knowledge could never give them on its own. Meaning, truth, and the wisdom that flows from encountering God in the flesh. And isn't that where we find ourselves today? Surrounded by endless information, empowered by technologies like AI, but still asking some of the oldest human questions. What is truth? What is the purpose of my life? Where do I find meaning? What do I need more than anything in the whole world? The Magi remind us that knowledge is a powerful tool, but wisdom is a greater gift. Knowledge can tell us how to build, calculate, or predict, but wisdom tells us about God's love. Knowledge can map out the stars, but the light of the world is the wisdom of God. So as we move deeper into an age of artificial intelligence, the Magi's story speaks louder than ever. It tells us that knowledge may be abundant, but wisdom is still rare. And true wisdom, That kind that satisfies the searching heart is not found in data, but it is only found in the one that says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The term Magi is where we get our word magic. They weren't magicians in the entertainment sort of way. They were scholars, astronomers, astrologers, and in many cases practitioners of ancient mystery religions. They studied the stars, interpreted dreams, explored the movements of history. But in their world, knowledge was never free. It was transactional. You sought the gods for insight. You offered something in return, sometimes even your own moral integrity. Wisdom came at a price. The Magi had lived in that economy their whole lives. Everything was a trade. Give in order to get. Until this day. Because what they encountered in this little home is not the kind of love you barter for. This is not man striving upward to pry open the secrets of heaven. This is God stepping down, offering himself as a gift. John 3:16 says it plainly, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. And Galatians 4:4 reminds us, when the fullness of time came, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman. Born of a woman. That's exactly what the Magi see, a woman and her child. But this is no ordinary child. This is the eternal Word made flesh, the one through whom all things were created, now nursing, sleeping, growing, learning, wrapped in the ordinary rhythms of human life. The Magi had spent their lives pursuing knowledge for power. Here they encounter power wrapped in humility, strength clothed in weakness, the wisdom of God in the form of a child, Emmanuel, God with us. The kanji for love has on the left, woman, on the right, child. It's easy to stop at the surface, to see love simply as an affection between a mother and her child. But what if, for those who actually saw this moment, this woman and this child, it meant far more? What if that moment was even greater than the star blazing in the heavens? What if this was the very sign Isaiah had foretold? Not just any mother, not just any child, but Mary and Jesus. Centuries earlier, Isaiah 7:14 had spoken it. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. For the Magi in that humble room, prophecy was unfolding before their very eyes. Emmanuel, God with us. The unimaginable had become reality. The God of heaven loved us so much that he refused to remain distant. He stepped down into flesh and blood. He came to be with us. Think about how far away from God they must have felt before this very moment. They had spent their lives scanning the skies, reading ancient scrolls, decoding omens. The creator of the stars himself seemed distant to them, unreachable. And now, here he was, not in fire and thunder, not in the dazzling brilliance of a star, but in the loving, caring arms of his mother. The God who spoke galaxies into existence had also created man in his image, and in that image he himself was born. This is his design, built into creation from the very beginning. And that moment was so pivotal, so powerful, so overwhelming. The Magi fell to the ground, and then the Magi carried that moment back with them. They couldn't let it be forgotten, so they wove this very sign into their own language, not as a fleeting memory, but as a permanent testimony, a character etched into writing itself, capturing mother and child, declaring for generations to come that what they had witnessed, the sign of God's love, the sign of God with us. When we see the woman with her child, we're seeing a reflection of the Creator's heart, his love for us. And notice something. The Magi weren't the only ones to see this. When the shepherds heard the angelic announcement of Christ's birth, they too hurried to Bethlehem. Luke tells us they found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in a manger. For them too, their first encounter with the love of God was this same picture. The child and his mother. The shepherds were simple men, watching sheep by night. The Magi were learned men, watching the stars by night. Worlds apart and at least a year apart, arrive at the same kind of scene, a woman and her child. And in these different moments in time, God was speaking through a similar setting, a message meant for every heart. Whether you're the humblest laborer or the wisest scholar, the sign of God's love, a woman and her child. The woman Mary silently declaring, Emmanuel, God with us, and the child, without uttering a single word, declaring, I love you. Whenever we see the kanji for love, the wise men wanted us to be transported back to the story from which it came, the very event when they entered the house and saw the child with his mother. This was not just affection. This was the fulfillment of prophecy. Isaiah 9:6 says, For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. And before that, in verse 2, it had promised, the people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. The world was in darkness, and these men from the east saw a great light in the heavens. It led them to the true light of the world. Jesus himself would later say in John 8:12, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. For the Magi, the light in the sky brought them to the light of life. And the moment they saw him, the child and his mother, that image became for them the light that revealed to them the picture of God's love. From then on, every time they wrote woman and child, every time they saw that kanji, it reminded them the darkness has been pierced, the light has come, and God's love has appeared. For much of their lives, the Magi had been dabbling in wisdom that was, in truth, utter darkness. They sought answers in the stars, in secret texts, in rituals of mystery religions. What they gained might have looked like knowledge, but it was always partial, always costly, and always left them searching for more. But when they walked into that house in Bethlehem, the search was over. The wisdom they found in the child was unlike anything they'd ever known. Isaiah's words rang true. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. The wisdom the Magi discovered was not about controlling fate or manipulating hidden powers. It was about knowing the one who is wisdom, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. God gave us a picture that every human being could immediately understand, a mother and her child. That image is universal, no translation needed. But in Bethlehem, God expanded that picture beyond anything we could imagine. 1 John 4:9-10, this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us. The Magi experienced that truth with their own eyes. They weren't just told about love. They walked into a room where love was sitting in his mother's arms. And the shepherds saw this too, the same. They saw the same from the fields to the far-off nations. The story begins in the same way. A woman and a child. Bethlehem shows us God with us. Calvary showed us God for us. And the kanji for love became, for them, the shorthand for the moment they first understood it. And that's the Gospel Kanji. In this moment of mother and child, love itself spoke, Mary declaring, Emmanuel, God with us, and the child silently saying, I love you. But the Magi left another clue, another character, and this next one reveals why they were invited to see the Christ child at all. Because their journey began as a petition. a cry to God, and God answered. That's the mystery waiting in the next episode. So for now, subscribe, leave a review, tap the bell so you don't miss what comes next. This is Gospel Kanji. See you next time.